Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second public presentation that talks about your new National Cemetery. I'm Steve Best. I'm the Executive Director of the National Cemetery Administration's Continental District. I have oversight of 20 national cemeteries that go from Montana all the way down to Mississippi. I'm physically co-located with the Denver VA Regional Office up in Lakewood. And so my office and my staff have NCA oversight of the development of the cemetery. I'm also joined by Glenn Matteram, who's traveled in from Indianapolis today. Glenn is our chief of National Cemetery Administration's cemetery development. He's involved with the development of all of our new cemeteries. And I think some of you had a chance, if you were here in October, to meet him as well. And he's been intimately involved in this process as well. So I welcome you here for this update. Our purpose really this evening is twofold. Is one, to announce to you the name of your new national cemetery that has been approved by the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, and also to share with you some of the most recent renderings of what your new cemetery is going to look like, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have coming in. You may notice as you came in, there's some display items there, some items that you're welcome to take with you that talk a little bit about how we do business as an agency, but also it covers some of your benefits as veterans and in your eligibility to have this new cemetery as your final resting place. So we have some folks that can discuss that with you as well. In addition to Glenn and I from the National Cemetery Administration, we have Frida Robinson. Where's Frida? Back over in the back. Frida is visiting for a couple days, but she joined us here. She is the director of Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery out of San Antonio. We also have Howard Porter with us in the back, who has recently arrived in our district. He is the cemetery director of Fort Smith National Cemetery in Arkansas. And finally, Tony Sessions, who is the assistant director up at Fort Logan. So after we conclude the formal portion of this presentation, certainly they're available, and as any of us are, to have any individual questions answered that you may have, and would encourage you to do that. Also represented is the AES group, who are the architectural and engineers, and a lot of their good work ongoing that you will see here in a few minutes are their worked product. And so Russ Osler is here, who's the owner, one of the co-owners of AES, Rick Day, who's the project manager, and also Chris Benson, who also works for AES as well. So they certainly are available to answer any questions about the design and development process that we're in. And we have a couple other special guests as well. I'll introduce, certainly Congressman Lamborn is with us this evening, and we'll spend a couple minutes with you as well. This is our mission, and those of us who have the privilege of working for the National Cemetery Administration, one of three agencies within the VA, it's very simply stated that we honor veterans with final resting places in national shrines, and national shrines describes the standards that we maintain, the perpetual care of our cemeteries, and providing lasting tributes that commemorates our veterans and their family members' service and sacrifice to our nation. A very simply stated mission that we take very seriously, and we're very much dedicated to that prospect. Now, what I'd like to do before we go on is share a short video with you. Some of you have seen this before. I've seen it several times, and I always pick something else differently. But to help set the stage and the images for what eventually your national cemetery located here in the Colorado Springs area, serving the veterans of the greater Colorado Springs and Pueblo area, will mean, and what we do, and what, as an agency, what we do to serve our veterans and the community. So if you could please start the video.
For all who visit, a national cemetery is an awe-inspiring experience. the final resting place for over 3 million American heroes. This is hallowed ground, where we honor the service and sacrifice of our nation's veterans. The National Cemetery System began when Congress authorized President Lincoln to purchase cemetery grounds for casualties of the Civil War. Since then, veterans from every era and every conflict have been buried in more than 130 national cemeteries across the country. All honorably discharged veterans and their dependents are eligible for a burial at no cost to the veteran's family, as well as a burial flag, headstone or marker, and presidential memorial certificate. With that burial comes a commitment to maintain every grave in every cemetery forever as a national shrine. To our veterans and their families, from a grateful nation, this is our sacred trust to you. Dan Murphy's son, Lieutenant Michael Murphy, was killed in action in June 2005. He was a Navy SEAL and the first recipient of the Medal of Honor in the war in Afghanistan.
We wanted Michael buried here because I knew Calverton. My parents are buried here, and I knew the people who operated it, and I knew the care and dedication that they put into it.
A vast majority of the employees here are veterans themselves. They served our country. And they look at it as serving, again, being able to help people at what may be the toughest time of their life.
It's not only a job, but it's a devotion, a way in which to honor those that have sacrificed in defense of this nation. And so I couldn't think of a more fitting place to put my son, a hero, in this cemetery.
Groundskeeper Bill McNaughton is an Army veteran and retired NYPD officer. Each day he visits the grave of his son James, also an NYPD officer, and an Army Reserve Staff Sergeant. James was killed in Iraq in 2005.
I think almost 30 active duty here from Afghanistan and Iraq. To me, all these guys, they're here with people who understand this sacrifice. They all understand. We all understand.
Edgar Marsaw served 19 years in the U.S. Army. He now works at historic Natchez National Cemetery in Mississippi.
Everybody here is like a family to me, and I believe in treating my family well, and everybody's here. We want to make sure that when their loved ones come to visit them, we want them to be comfortable. We want, the overall appearance to be great.
My mom, my parents, my brother, my uncles are all buried in a national cemetery in St. Louis, and I remember how I was treated when I came there with my loved ones, and I try to do the same thing when families come into our cemetery, because we want them to feel that this is home and we're here to take care of them.
One frequent visitor is Albin Burtix, a veteran of the Korean War.
I visit my wife's gravesite traditionally once a week. It's close, easy access for me. It's peaceful, it's quiet. It's a great place to come for solitude and, of course, the memory of my wife.
Visitors to any national cemetery can't help but notice the special care taken of the markers and grounds, part of NCA's commitment to maintain them in perpetuity as national shrines.
It gives me great pleasure personally to know that when I pass on, that I will be interred here with my wife under these most beautiful conditions, without the necessity of family members having to come and to maintain the place or to discuss conditions with the management, knowing full well in my heart today that I will always be treated with dignity as having been a veteran, and that my wife has already had that same pleasure accorded to her.
Love you and miss you, sweetie.
NCA understands that the death of a loved one can be one of the most difficult times in life. One way we try to help is by simplifying the process of arranging the funeral.
We make it generally very easy. There's no complicated forms, there's no waiting period, there's no complex eligibility criteria. If you have a copy of your discharge, that's all we need, and we take it from there in a matter of hours.
Furthering our commitment to veterans and their families, NCA has embarked on one of the largest expansion efforts in its storied history. The South Florida National Cemetery is one of 7 new cemeteries opening by 2009 to serve our nation's veterans.
Today we are doing our dedication program. There are over 400,000 veterans in this area that we will serve with this cemetery. My job as a director and job of the staff is to provide an honorable and dignified burial for the family.
Today, Kim Reka has brought her children to visit the grave of their father, Christopher, a Vietnam veteran who was killed in the line of duty as a police officer in 2007.
There were about 5,000 people that came to the cemetery, and as my younger son Spencer referred to, it was a service that was fit for a king. He served his country and his community for most of his adult life. It was wonderful that he was honored, and the cemetery, they did a beautiful job. Everything just went so smoothly. It was beautiful.
I want to make sure that when they arrive here, everything goes according to plan. We treat each and every service as if it was the only one we ever did.
Burial services are provided for both casketed and cremated remains. Many cemeteries also provide interment above ground, in columbaria. Military honors are performed upon request by 2-person teams from the Department of Defense. Some cemeteries, like Minnesota's Fort Snelling National Cemetery, use volunteer rifle squads.
During our service, we first of all recognized the entrance of the deceased into the shelter. Right after that, we fire the rifles. Following that, taps, and then the folding of the flag, if it's necessary to fold the flag, and the presentation of the flag to the family.
And they place it in the hands of the widow, and you just kind of clutch it to yourself, you know, because that's the symbol of what they did for this country.
50,940 funerals we have provided service for. Weather has never been a factor. We are out here every day of the week, and that's the way we work.
And they were older veterans themselves doing the shooting, and it was like they almost had a tear in their eye.
Well, yeah,
because they're honoring one of their own, you know.
I say a prayer for all of them here, but it's so peaceful and so beautiful. When I pass, I'll be right here with Wally.
We take care of our own.
The National Cemetery Administration honors veterans with a final resting place that commemorates their service to our nation. All national cemeteries are maintained in perpetuity as national shrines. This service is provided at no cost to veterans and their dependents. For more information, visit our website at www.cem.va.gov. And thank you for your service.
We shared that video again because I've seen it many times, and I always pick something different that I missed before out of it. But I think it better than someone standing up here and talking to you really indicates what we do and what our mission is and what our job is to support our veterans and their families. So hopefully that was as meaningful to you as it always is to me when I see it. One addition, they talked about, they made reference to South Florida and some other new cemeteries, that your new cemetery is part of an expansion process that is really the largest within our national cemetery system, essentially since the Civil War. And currently we have a number of them, and I know that Glenn, who I introduced before and will be talking to you later as he walks through some of the renderings, is very much involved with. We have 2 new large cemeteries that are currently beginning interment operations and are well underway under construction in Florida, Tallahassee and Cape Canaveral. We have one that's in Omaha that has already broken ground. I think they're looking at sometime in the fall to do first interments, and then the last 2 of the 5 new major cemeteries that are being developed, of course, is here in the Colorado Springs area, and then another one in Western New York. And then we have a number of other ones in smaller rural areas. They'll be much smaller, but will serve more remote veterans communities. And as I'll mention here in a minute, I mean, it's when we're all said and done, hopefully by about the year 2020, we will be serving 95% of our veterans with a final resting place option within approximately 75 miles of where they live. So I mentioned one of the key aspects of why we were here tonight is to announce the name of the new cemetery. But as a matter of recalling this, that we began that process when we met with the community back in October, and we did a very extensive communication process, reaching out to our veteran service organizations, to a number of folks who had perhaps some interest in the name of this new cemetery. And really there at the bottom under A, B, and C are the criteria that we used. A name that helps identify the location of the cemetery site, a name that has broad appeal to the veteran community, and finally a name that provides a positive impression through history, through some of those other aspects of the region, of the community, that people then can identify that cemetery with its location. So we're going to announce it in a moment. Before I do that, I would like to invite Congressman Lamborn to come forward. He has some things he would like to share with you, who's been a strong supporter of this initiative to get a cemetery, among others, who have helping to get this cemetery in this area. So, Congressman, welcome. Thank you so much. Oops. I think you can just connect you back up.
Let me make sure I get hooked up here first.
I think it came out right out of there. I think it just fits. There it is.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, it's a real honor to be here. This is quite a special event. It means a lot to me. What a great day. What an exciting day for our community. We finally have not just the place, the design, the funding, but now a name for the National Veterans Cemetery here in the southern Colorado area. It's taken a lot of years of hard work by a lot of people to get to this place. And I can't tell the whole story of everyone who's done something, but I'll give you my perspective and what I've worked on. But before I do that, let me thank Vic Fernandez and his committee of local veterans who've worked so hard to bring us to this place. Even before I was elected to office in 2006 to an open congressional seat here in the 5th Congressional District, I vowed that one of my missions in Congress would be to work for a National Veterans Cemetery for southern Colorado. We had one way out in the Eastern Plains, and that's really not a viable option for most people in the Front Range. And we have Fort Logan in Denver. Fort Logan is becoming more and more filled with people being buried there, and it does not have a long projected life. Plus, it's hard to get there. And if you're elderly, fighting the traffic or bad weather, it's maybe impossible. So the first day in office, I turned in my bill request to say, let's create a Southern Colorado National Veterans Cemetery. They had to work on it overnight, so on the second day in office, it was ready, and I filed it. It's my second day in office, 9.5 years ago. I worked with John Salazar, who was in the majority. I was in the minority. I was a freshman in the minority, so the lowest of the low, you might say. And I worked with John Salazar in the majority, and he represented, among other places, Pueblo County, Pueblo City. And he and I came to an agreement that, and he had wanted a veterans cemetery in Pueblo. And there are many fine veterans in Pueblo. There are some Medal of Honor winners from Pueblo, as you may know, as well as from El Paso County. And we talked it over. He recognized that we have so many veterans here in El Paso County, and will in the future, that as long as we agreed to put it in southern El Paso County so that people in Pueblo had access, he would go along with having it officially put in El Paso County. And that whether he was in the majority and me in the minority or vice versa, and 4 years later it was vice versa, we would work on it that way. And we would work together arm in arm. And so that's what we've done ever since. In 2008, we had another breakthrough. I got on the Veterans Affairs Committee right from my first day in office. That was a meaningful, important thing for me. And I got on the subcommittee having to do with cemeteries. They call it the Disability and Memorial Affairs Subcommittee, DAMA Subcommittee. And so I was well placed to have some influence with these kinds of decisions and funding going forward. But I did that purposefully to be able to help out the veteran population here in the 5th Congressional District. Well, on the subcommittee, me as the ranking member and the subcommittee chairman from New York, we brought out Bill Turk, William Turk, with the VA at that time, to look at the places here, to look at the need here, to come and visit and have a hearing, have a field hearing here in El Paso County. And so he came out, and as luck or providence would have it, he came out in May. You'd think the weather would be good. The weather's good today. A blizzard hit the day he got here. And he almost didn't get to the hearing on time because of the bad weather. He almost couldn't get over Monument Hill. And he saw for himself firsthand how bad weather can keep people from the Pikes Peak region going up to Denver. And he saw the need to have it was impressed deeply on him in a firsthand personal kind of way that yes, we qualified and we should have a veteran cemetery here in El Paso County. So he and the VA were on board after that. Now, it finally got into law in 2010. We got funding shortly thereafter. But it's just so important, just to revisit what the video is telling us about and what Steve and Glenn are saying here today. Veterans deserve this honor and recognition, to have a final resting place for the country to thank them and honor them for their service and their sacrifice. All gave some gave all. And so it's just really important that we have this opportunity to do this. We have so many veterans here, and it was underserved. There was this 75-mile rule in place, and depending on where you drew the circle and how you drew it, it might or might not include most of El Paso County. It was kind of they were doing their best, but it was kind of arbitrary. So finally, we did get everything on track, the funding and everything. The VA, a couple years ago, they bought the land, almost 400 acres out here, out east. And I want to say that a lot of people have helped in this process, and I'm going to recognize right now. We have County Commissioner Dennis Heisey, who's here. We have, I believe, Sally Clark is here, County Commissioner, State Representative Gordon Klingenschmidt. But Dennis Heisey had this part of the county in his commissioner district. And so he was intimately involved every step of the way. And I want to give him a shout out for his contribution. So we finally have a permanent location. The design is being worked on as we speak. The funding is and will be in place as we go forward. And so it's just such an honor to be here today to present to you, present to the community, the actual name that will be used for this National Veterans Cemetery. So I'll do everything I can to make sure the timeline continues forward, to make sure that the funding stays in place. As far as timing goes, it looks like about a year from now, sometime in 2017, we'll be able to have the groundbreaking. And in 2018, we'll be able to start with the first early interments and burials. That's kind of the projected timeline today. So I'm just so excited. It's just an honor for me to serve those who have served our country. My father was a World War II veteran. God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago at the age of 93. My oldest son is a veteran, both in the Army. And it's just my way of serving those who have served us by pushing hard on this project, making sure it came to fruition, And so I'm just so excited and pleased that we can have this event today. One more milestone in the creation of this National Veterans Cemetery. So if Steve and Glenn could come up, we're going to actually unveil the name.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And without any further ado, let me share with you an image of the sign that's on the property where this National Cemetery will be built, with the name that has been approved by the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And here it is. So we thank all of you that submitted recommendations for names, but I think if you look at that, and this is probably not a big surprise to many of you, but certainly it very well meets the criteria that the department establishes for the naming of our cemeteries. And certainly thanks to Glenn Matterham, who really spearheaded the campaign that helped to get word out to across the area that will be served by this cemetery to ensure that folks had the opportunity to nominate a name, and I think we've got it right. I think we've got it right. And Vic, thanks to you and your committee as well.
Yeah, thanks so much we did reach out to the veteran community widespread in the area. We did receive a number of name suggestions, but this one, Pikes Peak National Cemetery, just received overwhelming support. When all was done and said, it best met the criteria that we were looking for. And the veteran community just overwhelmingly picked this name. So congratulations on that.
A couple other slides, and then I'm going to hand the mic over to Glenn to continue the second part of what our purpose was here to be, but just to set a little bit of context for you as we go forward. You know, I mentioned before that I mentioned that date of 2020 that was our target, not only to include Pikes Peak National Cemetery, it's nice to be able to use that name going forward now, is a part of that expansion. But look at the comparison between when we started in 2001, when really we were only able to serve about 70% of the veteran community with a final resting place, out to 2020 when this expansion process continues, will be up to about 95%, and that's meeting our commitment as a department to our veterans and honoring their service. You can see all of the branch, the service branch emblems there, but for those people who will eventually be serving at the cemetery and serving this community, as you can see, we've got quite a few, somewhere between 17 and 1,800 employees throughout the nation that operate all of our active cemeteries. Of course, the largest percentage of our agency are outside the District of Columbia area, and nearly 75% of our employees are veterans themselves. And so they carry that mantra forward of, and truly believe in their hearts and in their deeds of serving veterans. But our other 25% are exceptionally dedicated to serving veterans as well. And so you can see a little bit of a profile of some of our employees, and that percentage of veterans who serve our agency is the highest of any federal agency that are out there, and we, including a number of disabled veterans and a number of who have returned from service in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is just a brief summary, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but just to remind you of some of the burial benefits that go along with that, including a final resting place in one of our national cemeteries. The benefit includes the opening and closing of the gravesite, a grave liner, the perpetual care of that cemetery, and that's what our staff really works hard to continue to do. A headstone or marker or niche, that's the memorialization, and that includes both at a national cemetery but also at a private cemetery, as well as a bronze medallion that are primarily used at a private cemetery, that if a family chooses their loved one to be interred there, it still recognizes their service and their status as a veteran. A presidential memorial certificate that all eligible veterans are entitled to. Of course, the flag, which is a very visual symbol of our veterans' service, and certainly the Department of Defense provides military honors as well that goes with it, that really capsulizes our ability to celebrate and to memorialize the service of our veterans to our nation. I won't spend a lot of time on this. We've got some folks here that I introduced before, including Mr. Elton Wooten, who's in the back of the room, who'll be glad to answer any specific questions you might have about eligibility or criteria, but that's an important part of our service to our veterans and their families, is to work through the eligibility and scheduling process. And so that highlights some of the basic eligibility criteria there, but that is also online. There's numbers you can call. So there's a lot of information out there, and we have some in the back of the room here as you came in, if there's any questions about your eligibility. And now I'd like to call Glenn up to really run you through where we're at in the design process, some of the things that are going to make up your new cemetery, Pikes Peak National Cemetery, and also provide you some of the most recent images of what your new cemetery is going to look like. So, Glenn, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. So thank you all for coming out tonight. You know, I know it takes a lot of effort to come out to a meeting like this. And you know, what we've seen over and over here in Colorado Springs is a tremendous amount of interest from the veteran community. And you know, the folks that come out to these meetings, we know that you go back and talk to your friends who are veterans. And so we're excited to bring this new National Cemetery to Colorado Springs. And we hope and we know that the veteran community is excited about it coming here. We think this is going to be a great addition for Colorado Springs, a really nice addition for the veteran community, and just a great partnership between the VA, the National Cemetery, and the veterans here in Colorado Springs. So anytime we build a new national cemetery, and I've got about 15 slides we're going to go through, and I'll go very quickly because these slides are going to show you a little bit about what this new cemetery is going to look like. So anytime we build a new national cemetery, these are the features we add. How many of you have been to Fort Logan? Probably, yeah, many of you. So you have already familiarity with what a national cemetery consists of. A public information center is where the restrooms are, where you can ask questions. Visitors can come out and find out information about the cemetery. The administration building is where our cemetery representatives and cemetery director work from. We have a maintenance building, which is where all the caretakers that take care of the grounds and do the burials operate from. A new honor guard building. So here, perhaps the DOD will be providing honors. There may be a volunteer honor guard squad. We don't know that yet. But certainly, any veteran that asks for honors and is eligible for it, the honor guard will be there to provide that for them. Committal service shelters are where the actual service occurs. When you come from the funeral home, and you'll see a picture of what a committal shelter looks like. We have pre-placed crypts in the ground to receive caskets, in-ground cremation niches for cremations that would go into the ground. Columbaria niches are for cremations that are going to go above the ground. We're even going to put a natural burial section in here. The natural burial section is going to be something a little different than what we normally do, but it would be for veterans who may want to be in a more naturalized setting without a concrete vault, perhaps even without a casket. So as that becomes more popular in today's world, we're going to put that feature in and try it out here and see, test the popularity here in Colorado Springs. Flag assembly area is used for events several times a year. And with that, I'm going to start moving on to the slides because a picture tells 1,000 words. So the cemetery site is located about 2 miles east of the airport. It's relatively easy to find on Drennan Road. That's an aerial view of the overall site, 347 acres. Right now, there's nothing out there on the acreage. It's just raw prairie. It does have a nice view of Pikes Peak. And the intent of this 374 acres is really to be able to bury, to accommodate the burial needs of Colorado Springs for 100 years or even longer than that. As designed right now, this cemetery will at least accommodate 150 years of burials at the current burial rate. So there's 2 other national cemeteries in Colorado. You probably know them, Fort Logan in Denver. Fort Lyon is over to the east. There's also 2 state-run cemeteries, the Veterans Memorial Cemetery of Western Colorado, that's in Grand Junction. and the Colorado State Veterans Cemetery at Home Lake in Monte Vista. So in January 2014, VA purchased this land that you see. It was called Rolling Hills Ranch. The developer was going to put it, the developer had intended to make it into a housing subdivision. We think it'll have a much nicer use as a national cemetery. The VA paid $4.49 million. That was the fair market value for it, and it's located in southern El Paso County. So when we build a cemetery, we're not going to develop that whole 374 acres at once. That wouldn't be cost effective. You know, we know that we're building that property will last 150 years. So we build for the first 10 years of burials. And I'm going to try and describe to you what you're looking at here. So this is Drennan Road at the top. As the funeral cortèges come from the city, they would reach the main entrance here and make a right-hand turn and enter on the main drive and drive up to the Public Information Center. Right there is the Public Information Center with the restrooms and the admin staff. That's the main focal point when you arrive. From there, the funeral cortèges would continue on this road to a committal service shelter here. There's also a second committal service shelter here in case there's two services going on at once. So a national cemetery typically buries from about 10 o'clock in the morning till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you have two families that both want an 11 o'clock service, hey, we need two shelters. Sometimes these cemeteries can get quite busy. You know, at Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis, which is one of our busiest national cemeteries, there's days when they do 20, 30, even 35 burials in one day. Now, obviously, you're not going to have that kind of rate here. Colorado Springs is not the same as St. Louis. But there could be days when there's 5 burials, 6 burials, 2 burials. The numbers probably will range anywhere from 1 to 5 burials a day at a cemetery of this size. This is what the cemetery looks like when it's fully built out. If you could come back 100 years from now, this is what you would see from the air. So, you remember we saw the main entrance was here, and you came around and you came to the admin building here, and the grave sites are all in the middle. Here's the assembly area, here's a committal shelter, here's another committal shelter. But all these other committal shelters are being added over the decades. Every decade we add some more burials, then we add some more roads. We start coming out this direction at maybe years 70, 80, 90, 100. We're way out over here. This cemetery and this property has a lot of room for future development. It will be here for many generations. So landscaping intensity. We understand, and you understand, that we're not back east where it rains 50 inches a year. We're in a part of the country where water is a precious resource, and we understand that. So maybe you get 13, 14, 15 inches of rainfall annually here. I'm not sure the exact number. What the landscaping intensity drawing is intended to show you is that anywhere where there's a veteran grave, these are burial sections, there's going to be lush, green, beautiful turf on those grave sites. In areas that haven't yet been developed for graves, that are going to be developed in the future, it will be more of a naturalized landscaping. You can see this is going to be use a lot less water. When we get to the point where we develop this and start putting graves and burials into here, that will change over from the low intensity to the high intensity. So the whole point of creating a naturalized, beautiful cemetery that uses regional vernacular, regional plant materials, and low water usage is to conserve water. It's a precious resource. It's expensive. You guys need it to drink. You need it for your houses. We understand that the veteran grave sites need to be green. It's a place of honor, and they're going to be green, and they're going to be beautiful. But much of the cemetery in the future years, these areas that aren't being developed until decades and decades from now will remain actually in their natural state, just natural prairie grass, much like what it looks like now, a little more enhanced. What we want to do is get the cows off the site. We have cows trespassing right now. We're going to put fencing around the entire site so that we can keep the cattle off in the future, and that will help allow the grounds to renaturalize. So water conservation, native species landscaping, you get an idea of the plants there. The proposed overall landscaping concept is what we call regional Colorado. We recognize that it's semi-arid nature of the surrounding natural plains, the need to conserve water and still provide a dignified appearance of the grounds. The landscape architect for this job is a local landscape architect from this, I think is he from Colorado Springs? Hey, what's the name of the company? Yeah, so we purposely hired a local landscape architect because we knew that he understood the water issues, the turf issues, the landscape issues. We want this to be a beautiful example of regional Colorado. The majority of the cemetery will have naturalized plantings with non-mowed native grass species, manicured green turf only occurring in the burial sections. So, this is a graphic rendering kind of showing you what it would look like. The burial section on the right is going to have that beautiful green. But when you get out of that burial section and you start going to other areas, it's going to turn back into a naturalized prairie grass. There's still going to be beautiful plantings throughout. So the difference between this cemetery and Fort Logan, when you go to Fort Logan, everything is green everywhere. And that takes a tremendous amount of water to do that. So this is the main loop perspective. If you were a bird, kind of looking at the public information center here where the restrooms are, the administration center here. The initial burials will be in this area and this area over here. As the funeral cortèges come in, they're going to park along here, use the restrooms, get back in their vehicles, come along this road out. The committal shelter is over here. The service occurs here. The main U.S. flagpole is here. This rendering doesn't show it. Pikes Peak is back over here. These are columbaria over here. So this is just to give you an idea. It's hard before the cemetery is built to understand the layout or what it's going to look like. This is to give you an idea conceptually of what it's going to look like. This is a conceptual of the front entrance. You can see that there's front entrance gates here. These are the exit gates here. It says Pikes Peak National Cemetery in the middle. It's a dry stacked stone wall with a local stone veneer. What you see landscaping-wise here is a mature landscaping. So you're not going to see this on day one. The landscaping is going to look obviously smaller on day one. But in 5 years, 10 years, as that landscaping matures, this is what you're going to see. What we want to do is provide visitors with a real sense of arrival. When they come down Drennan Road, you've been out there. It's wide open plains. When you start arriving to a location like this, first thing you're going to see is a beautiful wrought iron fence. As that wrought iron fence continues, you're going to come up to an entrance like this. It's going to be very clear to veterans and their families that they're entering a place of honor when they come through these gates. So I mentioned where the assembly area was. This is as if you're standing at the assembly area for a Memorial Day event. The speaker would be up on the platform, the U.S. flag, the 5 service flags, Pikes Peak in the background. Generally, it's going to be a beautiful setting for ceremonies. This is available really to the veteran community throughout the year. If the veteran community has events, we can welcome through our cemetery director for the community request to be able to use this. Typically it gets used on Memorial Day, but it can also be used throughout the year for other things. This is the admin public information center. So the architect took some liberty and took some inspiration from the local geology and the local scenery in the area. Obviously, you're in a beautiful area. Today, before I got here, I drove through Garden of the Gods, which I've been through before. But every time I go through there, I'm just amazed at how beautiful it is. You all live here, so it doesn't, you're so used to it that when you come from Indiana like me, believe me, it's a lot of fun to drive through Garden of the Gods. So you can see with the roof lines, and this is going to be a stacked stone material, and it's actually going to be darker appearance than that. But they're trying to take the banding and the stone, and you'll see that these are renderings, black and white, of that same building, looking at it from different angles. And so if you're looking, if you're walking into the lobby is this glass enclosure here. The restrooms are over on that side of the building there. The lobby looks out towards Pikes Peak. This is the administrative part of the building. So again, you're coming in as a visitor, restrooms to the right, the views of Pikes Peak off this way, the administrative staff and the support that you need over in this side of the building. This is what the public sees on the public side of the building. This is what the cortege sees on the cortege side of the building. So typically, if you're part of a cortege, you're coming in on the right side of the building. If you're part of the public that are just coming for a daily visitation, you're coming in on the left side of the building. This is a better rendering of the public information building. You get a better sense of what the stone is going to look like. And you can see how the regional vernacular of the geology is being drawn into that design. If you're standing in the Public Information Center, the restrooms are to your left, and you can see that you're going to have beautiful views, not only across the cemetery looking towards the U.S. flagpole, but with Pikes Peak in the background beyond it. This is what the columbaria are designed to look like. Some of you have seen columbaria if you've been to Fort Logan. Columbaria is getting increasingly popular. So when a burial comes to the cemetery in an urn as a cremation, there's two choices for that burial. It can go into the ground, just like a casket would, or it can go into one of these niches. This is where the committal service occurs. The family comes from the funeral home, they follow the hearse, they come to a shelter like this, and they've got a scheduled time slot throughout the day where they use that shelter to say their final goodbyes. The reason that the VA doesn't do graveside services, what you might see in a private cemetery, what you always see in a private cemetery, is typically they set up a little green tent right next to the gravesite. But the way that the burials occur, when you're doing 2 to 5 burials a day, and those burials are happening in close proximity to each other, it's not safe, it doesn't provide privacy. This type of a committal shelter provides a much nicer service experience. Yeah, I have a question here. Yeah, that I don't know. They also have committal shelters at Arlington, or do they do graveside? So Steve, maybe you pick that up. I'm an engineer. He's a military guy, so.
We get that question often. One of the things is by doing and using the committal shelters, not only, as Glenn said, does it allow us to perhaps meet more families' needs on a particular day that they do, but they also don't have to wait near as long. It varies, but the average time to wait, particularly for a casketed interment at Arlington, goes anywhere from 30 to 45 days or longer. So they do the full Monty of services there, but it takes much longer. So when they go to the gravesite and do that, it's scheduled over a much longer period, and therefore people have to wait much longer to do that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It is a different approach. Of course, the Department of the Army runs Arlington as well, so they operate obviously under some different, although it is still a national cemetery, and it's still obviously designed to commemorate service of our veterans. But that's the main difference in that, in terms of we're able to accommodate more families on a more flexible basis. Not a day. Yeah, but yeah. They do certainly less numbers than we do at our larger cemeteries that are doing that. And that's a part of it. And of course, it requires a larger staff as well to do that as well. So I think that's the primary difference, and we operate that consistently across all of our national cemeteries. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, I understand. But thank you for asking that question.
So the caretakers operate out of a maintenance building, which is not a highlight of the cemetery, and you can see this is a low-key design. It'll have access off Drennan Road so that it's more accessible to semi-trucks that are delivering headstones and vaults and different type of features. So this is something that won't be very noticeable in the cemetery. It's more off by the power lines, and it was put there for a reason, because it's not really a feature that we want the public to see. It's more of a maintenance thing. But in many cases, those cemetery caretakers are veterans themselves. And so as Steve mentioned earlier, this whole concept of veterans taking care of veterans is throughout NCA. I think 87% of the NCA employees are veterans. So believe me, they understand the importance. It's a one time to get it right for a family that comes for those funeral services. One chance to get that service right. And so NCA understands that. We have very high customer satisfaction ratings. I mentioned that back in October. When they do customer satisfaction surveys, NCA always scores at the top, higher than companies like Southwest Airlines, higher than companies like Pepsi-Cola and Apple and all kinds, and the highest in the federal government as well. Every employee in NCA understands the National Shrine commitment to veterans. So this is probably what many of you are interested in, the timeline. And Congressman Lamborn mentioned a little bit about that. So the master planning was completed in February of this year. The master plan is the layout for the whole 374 acres. The design and development and the construction documents for phase one, that first 10-year build-out, which will have all the initial roads, the initial buildings, and the initial burial sites, we expect that to be completed this fall. So the start date for the cemetery construction doesn't exist yet. We don't know when it is. We can tell you this. VA asked for the construction funding in the FY17 budget. FY17 starts on October 1 of this year. President Obama took that and included it in his presidential budget to Congress. And that's where it sits right now. So we don't have any feel or feedback, and we don't have any knowledge of whether it's going to be approved or not. But assuming that it does get approved for FY17, once that funding becomes available, it takes the VA about 6 months to solicit the contract, evaluate the bids, do all the legal requirements, and make a construction award. So if the funding was available, for example, on October 1, you could see that about 6 months after that, the construction would be ready to start, or in the vicinity of starting. If the construction money was not available until March or April, it would take 6 months after that. So we're about at least a year away from the construction start. Once the construction does start, then it takes about 12 months to construct the early turnover area. Early turnover area is where we put grave sites in that can be used while the rest of the construction is still going on. So the overall project would take about 24 to 30 months to construct, but the first burials would be starting about 12 months after the first construction starts. So we're making a lot of progress here. And I know when I talk to Vic, it's all, he's been waiting many, many years. And so I feel for Vic and his whole group because, they've been from the start, the first ones to ask for it. They've seen it come. We're making tremendous progress at this point. The light, I can see the end of the tunnel, and the light is there. And it's not a train coming towards us. It's actually a good thing. So we're thinking that this is going to happen in FY17, and we're kind of waiting for we won't know anything on that FY17 funding until that budget is passed. So this is what NCA is all about, fulfilling the final promise of care to America's veterans. If you've been to other national cemeteries, you've seen that in action. You're going to have a first-class national cemetery, world-class cemetery here. It's going to be a beautiful addition to your community. So with the expansion of the national cemeteries and the culture of service that's second to none, veterans today have greater access to the burial and memorial services that they've earned and fully deserve. NCA is proud and excited to bring this national cemetery to Colorado Springs. We think it's going to be a great thing for your community, and we hope you're as excited about it as we are. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions for either Steve or myself. And if you want to ask a question now, we've got microphones. If you want to wait till afterwards and catch us one-on-one, you're welcome to do that. If you don't want to even talk tonight, but you want to send us an email, there's the email, and you're welcome to send us email. And I'll turn it over to Mr.
Actually, Glenn, this is really more of a comment, but I see that we do have in our audience a representative from Cory Gardner's office. Senator Gardner sent a person here to be with us. And so I want to say that we've had great delegation support for this project for years. Both Senator Gardner, Senator Bennett, and all of the representatives, both Democratic and Republican alike, have been on board from day one. So I want to give them a thank you also. And we do have a representative from Senator Bennett's office as well. So thank you both for being here.
Would ask, I'll hand you the mic. Thank you, Congressman, for your question so that we can all hear your question, and then we'll do what we can between folks that are assembled here to answer your question. So, right here.
You had that one view of the committal site, and it was open all except the back end, okay? People that live in this area will know one thing, that when we have winds, we have winds. And it gets pretty cold. I've been to several national cemeteries, and I've seen I like the design of this, but you got to keep in mind, if that wind is wherever it's set up, you're going to have a lot of complaints on that, I believe. But it's something to think about when you're modifying that. If you consider those open, see, it's open all the way around except the back. Correct. And that wind's going to blow you away. I've been there, done that.
And this is our standard design for the committal shelters. You may notice back here that part of the design with the trees, and then you can't quite see it, but there's going to be an area built up too, specifically positioned to mitigate wind coming in. Yes, exactly.
So yeah, the landscape architect is designing a berm with some heavy landscaping on the side of the shelter where the prevailing winds typically come from. This rendering doesn't do a great job of showing that berming and that landscaping. This is very typical for our committal shelters. Rather than being like an enclosed chapel, it's an outdoor structure that's intended to kind of replace a graveside tent. We definitely understand the wind issue. I can tell you they're open all over the country. At Fort Snelling in Minneapolis, they're open on all sides. We understand the concern, and we definitely are going to try and address that with berming and landscaping and different things. One of the nice things about having it a little bit, having it open is that when that honor guard comes and does their thing, everybody that's under that roof line can turn and actually has really good sighting to the honor guard. So there's some drawbacks too. There's pros and cons when you enclose these things.
No, and the service itself is by design is very short, and it is the final goodbye. And I think, as Glenn said, it gives folks the opportunity. Exactly, and that was the intentional part of the design to help break the predominant direction of the wind.
Yeah, as we finalize these drawings, I'm going to bring that comment forward to our design team over here and make sure, because we do understand that, and we get that comment a lot during the design process, and people really want to make sure that that wind is not just whistling through the building. So,
thanks. Were you next? Well, other questions? Sure. That's okay. I'll bring it up. I can use the exercise.
I thought that was a really good point to mention that about the wind, since we just recently had some major windstorms. But even having a half wall, even like a glass brick wall around there would be really helpful. I don't know how high you want to go so you still keep the view, but I mean, something really should be addressed, because I mean, there's a lot of people that would be knocked over by the wind strength around here. And you know, anybody that has any kind of balance issues, I'm an occupational therapist, that's definitely a very, very important thing that you brought up. So doing, like I said, just maybe a half wall, something with, I saw up in Denver, we went to a retirement of my father's good friend's daughter. She was retiring after serving in the Marine Corps, and they had a beautiful building there with a glass wall, brick wall, and it had a big Marine Corps emblem. And I was just thinking about that, and it was really impressive. So maybe having at least one corner possibly where people could go and stand so they can get away from all the wind. But I think that's a very, very important thing that you noted. I think it's a great idea.
So the 5 service seals will be in the back wall. Will be in the back wall here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They don't show up very well in the rendering, and they'll be. The emblems will be there, and a lot of times the families like to come up and touch the emblem. We put them at a level where they're touchable. I understand what you're saying. So the service seals are a big part. We'll take that back to the design team. We still have some design to move forward with this year, and we can bring that comment back about really trying to shield the wind through those shelters with something that will help.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Well, after doing a lot of work to honor a local Medal of Honor recipient, there are 2 others that came from El Paso County. Would there be a way to have some way to memorialize them inside the cemetery?
Well, part of that would, are they memorialized somewhere else?
Just at their local cemetery.
Okay. Because basically our rules on that are that we memorialize a veteran one time.
Well, I was saying like maybe some trees with a plaque saying this represents these 3 Medal of Honor recipients.
We would look at that, but typically from a naming standpoint, a veteran is identified one time by name in a cemetery. But I know there'll be a memorial walkway as well that organizations can be represented along there, but typically that's kind of our
Are they
standard
buried?
process.
Are they buried elsewhere, or they're not? They're
buried in private cemeteries.
So a lot of times when we open a new cemetery like this, families choose to disinter, and it's I'm not suggesting that would be anything to do, but some families actually do it. They disinter and they actually move it to the cemetery. The other thing we see is a lot of times as this cemetery starts getting closer, families that have cremation urns will hold the urns. If you know the cemetery is under construction and you have an urn, you could set it on your mantle, which a lot of people do, and they wait for the cemetery to open. Because when we open, sometimes they'll have 20, 30, 50 urns within the first month that have all been held waiting to go in that national cemetery. But in this case, the gentlemen are already buried in a private cemetery. So what Steve is saying, that's my understanding as well, is that there can only be one headstone or one that's their memorialization. Exactly. So that's a policy thing for NCA.
Yes.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, and maybe I missed this, but what you think the numbers will come in terms of once the cemetery is open, how many? And then secondly, what's the process for family or spouses to be buried with their loved one?
Sure, thank you. That's a very good question. When we get, I think Glenn had mentioned before, we're anticipating about 15 to 20 interments a week. That could change and vary. I mean, we have not started or opened operations yet, but based on the size of the veteran community, the age of the veteran community, that's what we're initially estimating, and that goes into the design, as Glenn mentioned, that we're looking at developing about 10 years worth of interment areas, if that increases, then we would look at developing a further part of the cemetery to ensure that we're always well out in front of the needs. Relative to a spouse, I mean, that's part of the design, and it's part of the benefit that goes to our veteran is that their spouse or a child under a certain age, or an adult dependent child, unmarried adult dependent child, is also authorized to be interred there in the gravesite with the veteran as well. And so hence, as Glenn described, that the provisions are made within both the casketed and the cremation area to accommodate both a veteran and their spouse. Did that answer your question?
Yes, the statistics show that, or imply that there might be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 burials in the first year, and then that number would continue, although the burials do start slowly tapering down on first interments as the World War II generation gets older. But right now we're building for anticipating about 1,200 plus or minus in that first year.
Other questions?
I'm Vic Fernandez, and most of you know who I am. But first, I'd like to thank Congressman Lamborn and his leadership and support in Congress to establish the Pikes Peak National Cemetery. He and his assistant, Dale Anderson, I don't see Dale, where are you, Dale? There you are. Have had our back. And I say our back, I'm talking about the veterans' back here, since his election in 2006. We really appreciate that, sir. Also like to, I didn't realize that we were going to have somebody here from Congressman, or from Senator Bennett's office, but I'm glad you're here. You're Grego? Grego? Mucho gusto. Secondly, thanks to Executive Director Steve Best from the National Cemetery Administration, who has provided the added emphasis that the VA needed to move forward on this cemetery project. Thank you very much, Steve. Third, thanks to Glenn Matteram, the NCA Cemetery Development and Improvement Service chief, who took hold of the project, hired a veteran-owned A&E firm from Parker, Colorado, to put together this master plan and the architectural drawings for our cemetery. Thank you, Glenn, and thanks for making sure that the a veteran-owned organization got it. Fourth, my continued thanks to the Pikes Peak Cemetery Committee members. They're sitting up in the front here, and they're not all present. They had some people had other things to do. Over the past 17 years, they have had the tenacity to carry on pushing for the establishment of our Pikes Peak National Cemetery in spite of many setbacks. And finally, thanks to all of the veterans, you veterans, and veterans organizations in southern Colorado, and that includes most Pueblo, because we always have representatives on my committee from Pueblo. Where's my Marine? Stand up, please. This is one of them, okay? And it sounds like a cab call. Is Gary Owen, not Gary Owen. And I'd be remiss if I did not thank the city councils and the county commissions of El Paso County, Pueblo County, and especially Dennis and Sally Clark, who have been with us on this journey throughout the entire time. We thank you.
Thank you, Vic, and thank you all for coming out tonight and giving us the opportunity to provide you an update. We clearly have more work to do, but we're very excited about the progress, and I can tell you on behalf of my colleagues, both in the Department of Veterans Affairs within the National Cemetery Administration, our continuing dedication to make sure this happens. This is going to be, Pikes Peak National Cemetery is going to be a very special place. I think it's going to continue to honor the service and sacrifice of our veterans and their family members and serve this community for decades to come. So we're very excited to be a part of it, and certainly we are very dedicated to make that happen just as soon as possible. So we will stay around for a few minutes afterwards if any of you have any individual questions that you would like to ask. But again, thank you for coming, and we look forward to the opportunity in the future to continue to keep the community apprised of our progress to the day we dedicate this until the day of our first interments on through decades beyond that to continue to honor those veterans in our community. So thank you again for coming tonight.